Brian, how are we today?
Ryan, thank you for having me on the Intentional Growth Podcast. I'm excited about this one. This is going to be fun today.
I'm excited as well. We started kicking off with we have some parallel universe stories, it sounds like.
100%.
And I was giving you my background, but then my background is attributed to my father who got me into entrepreneurship. And I got your reach out from your PR team.
Yep.
And I don't take a lot of them. And I saw the Dropout millionaire and I was like, I'm fascinated immediately. So
I got to tell you a story about that too, if we get a chance.
Yeah, well, why don't you just give us like a 50,000 foot flyby, Brian, of like what you're up to, kind of your background. I want to unpack of just the journey of like why you were making decisions and where you are today and kind of how the whole thing unfolded.
Oh gosh. Okay. So 2 minutes. Started out as a kid who failed out of high school, not because I was dumb, because I was ADHD and didn't care, came from a bad childhood. Got kicked out of the house at 18, had no place to go, joined the military, got off active duty, tried to hold a job, couldn't because I was a terrible employee. So I figured I might as well work for myself, right? Started my first company at 21. It was landscaping, built it up, did really well until it didn't. It crashed and burned, learned a hell of a lot of good lessons in that one. Changed industries, went into insurance. That's another story. A year and a half into that, it was the dawn of the internet. And we had somehow developed I called it a virtual sales center. Today, they call it a direct-to-consumer call center. So I had 2 internet companies come to me, and one of them snatched me up really quickly. And we started selling insurance online as opposed to doing it face-to-face, which is what we used to do. That company ended up going public. We developed another platform that sells Medicare, blah, blah, blah. Got out of that, started another company back in the online insurance space. That one also got acquired by a venture capital group, and today that powers, I think, 9 different states under the ACA.
Wow.
Started another company, which was essentially a pay-per-performance online lead gen company, online marketing, basically. 3 years into that, we got acquired by a PE firm. That was an $80 million acquisition. That was the big one we did. And then it's weird, and you've probably experienced this a little bit, Ryan. Once you've sold a few companies or even one like yours, suddenly the industry looks at you as an expert, right? Because you've sold something. And so clearly you must be a genius. And I can remember standing in my first boardroom on a consulting project after we'd sold the company, talking to the CEO and the CFO and the CTO and the CIO of this multi-billion-dollar company. And the thought ran through my mind, 5 years ago, I was probably mowing your grass. And now I'm standing here telling you what's wrong with your sales organization. So fascinating the way the world turns, right? So did consulting for a few years, started another company, sold it for nothing. It was a bomb. Got into the restaurant business because I like to eat and drink for free. I've gone through 15 restaurants. I've got 4 today, small chain I own. Got into the real estate business. I own properties across Georgia and Florida. Wrote 3 books. 2 of them are Wall Street Journal bestsellers. But what I'm excited about today is about 6 months ago, I launched a consulting company. Not too terribly different than Arcona, but you guys are a little more specialized in the fractional CFO space than
the
me.
finance space. You're more like leadership and sales.
Yeah, working with these entrepreneurs and watching their eyes light up when they see how things work. And all of a sudden, sales close ratios go up and ROIs go up and marketing dollars go down. And, you know, I've turned a 75 million top line into 150 million in 10 months and turned a company that was losing $1 million a month as a public company. And we took them from $1 million a month loss to profitability in 18 months. And just watching people go through this process to me is just fascinating. So we built this consulting coaching company, which is what I'm excited about doing today. Started a podcast, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of different careers, a lot of different stuff I've done. That's the 50,000.
A lot of threads to pull.
Yeah.
No, that was so helpful, Brian, because first of all, it's helpful because my team and everybody's like, hey, Ryan, you got to shut up with your long intros and just get right to the guest. And you did a lot of the work for me there. Well, and what I think is super fascinating, Brian, and that I want to unpack is the why and how you got to where you are and where you're headed. And I want to go back to you dropped out of high school and I had, let me just share because I don't even know if the listeners ever heard this. So I was a bad student because of the same reasons. Like I literally couldn't pay attention, Brian. Like people would set these books down. I'm like, why am I supposed to read this? And they couldn't give me any logical explanation that made sense to me. Not to say that it wasn't actually logical, but I say that because I got to this experience where I was in 10th grade and there was the girls' soccer coach who was also the math teacher. He pulled me out and I was going through a bunch of family difficulties, and the guy looked at me and he said, "You're never going to amount to anything." And I
Yep.
was like,
Got those people in my life.
and I was just like, holy crap. I mean, like, not like, hey, what's going on? None of that. And so I have this I have this experience that I don't know. It sounds like it's somewhat different than yours, but go back to yourself. And I'm curious on how have you processed everything that you just described? If you were to go back to your 16-year-old self and be like, yo, here's what I've done, how would you react? Or like, what would you have said to yourself?
You know, I spent from the age of I had a bad childhood. I'm not even getting into how bad it was, but and then getting kicked out of the house at 18, no help, nothing. I had a chip on my shoulder the size of a VW, right? And it was because in my mind, it was all those people that told me that I was useless and I was never going to succeed. It was my teachers who failed me and my friends who laughed at me and my parents who, did what they did. And so you go through life with this thought process and what drove me personally was I had to prove to the world that I wasn't this loser that everybody said I was. And everybody said that I was going to end up doing nothing. So that was my driving force. It was anger. Honestly, people ask me what was my drive when I was younger, and I tell them it was anger. I was angry at the world, and I was angry at people telling me I couldn't do things, and I was angry because I wasn't doing things, and I was failing over and over. And you know what's funny about that, Ryan, is at some point after we had sold the companies, I'd made a bazillion dollars, and everything was cool, and I'd won the game, so to speak. You start doing some self-analysis, and you come to realize that it wasn't the world you were fighting with for 20 years. It was really your own self-image. I wasn't trying to prove to the world who I was. I was trying to prove to myself that I wasn't who they told me I was. They stopped thinking about me 20 years ago, but they were still living in my head, man. So that's a little self-realization you got to go through.
Well, yes. Oh my gosh, amazing. Agreed. How did you deal with that? How did you get to that? Like, because was the hole still there? You got the money, and because I mean, I hundreds of podcasts, Brian. Like so many people have similar experiences, which is why I'm so fascinated with this topic. Is how, like, were you just sitting there where you like had become financially free, and you're like, okay, like, but there was still something missing? How did you react?
Yeah, I'm going to take you down a road you probably don't expect here, but I was not present in my marriage. I did not treat my wife properly. I tell business owners this today all the time. Don't win the world and lose everything that's important to you in your life. Wow, okay. So I ended up getting divorced. After we sold the companies, we made all this money because I was dark to dark 7 days a week, right? Morning to night, dark to dark. I was not present in my marriage. I treated my wife like an employee because she worked for me. I didn't get to go to all my kids' stuff because I was too busy worried about trying to succeed and win the world and make money. And unfortunately, when we sold the companies, I remember telling my wife at the time, I said, hey, man, I win. I'm more successful than anybody I know. Let's go party and have fun and do all the cool things we would. And she said, you've been an ass for 20 years. I don't want to go have fun with you anymore. And I got divorced. Before I got divorced.
Did you expect that at all? Did you know that was coming, do you think?
We knew the marriage was falling apart at some point. But as part of that process, we started going through counseling to see if we could put it back together. And it was through that counseling that I started dealing with the childhood issues that made me realize all the things that I've now come to realize. So my self-reflection was not done voluntarily. It was done because I had hit rock bottom in my personal life. So I know so many people that they're super successful, but their personal lives are crap. And I was one of them.
Thank you. I can't thank you enough for sharing that, Brian, because that's honestly the point of the podcast and the show is like, how do we design our business, our life, our money, all to accomplish what we want, whatever that is. And like, I remember, Brian, I was at this conference. It was for privately held business owners. And for some reason, they got this corporate executive who was the CEO of Red Lobster. And he had been through 3 private equity rounds. And this guy was at like the pinnacle of his career, Brian. And like, just like, honestly, he said I more than any times I could count in that presentation. But then some guy in the audience goes, sir, what did you have to sacrifice to get here? And he goes, well, I was there for a couple of the big events with my kids. And I was like, well, of course, we all have 168 hours. And then we've got whatever time and energy or money that we can apply to get where we want to go. But like, what are the sacrifices? And that's where I think what your story is so powerful, because there's always another side and we don't share that very often of like what we're giving up.
Yeah. It's called Facebook happy, right? Everybody looks great on Facebook, but they're inside it's not working. And it's, we start businesses and entrepreneurs and we build them because we think we're going to create a lifestyle. I say people start businesses for two reasons. They either want to make a lot of money or they want to create a lifestyle. Either one of those they can't have in a job. The problem is entrepreneurs start doing this and they sacrifice the very thing that they were building the business for in the first place. I'm going to build a business so I have a lifestyle and fun. Me and my family can do all these things. And then they work 100 hours a week and they don't have a lifestyle and they ruin their marriage and they don't see their kids. And at the end of the day, they may win the world, but they lose everything that's important. And you got to get in there and go, hey. Listen, if I could go back, I would tell you that everything that I did was probably not worth it, because I would rather be married today and have done all the things that I could have done. But I was a guy who, would come home at night and I was tired and we'd go to a party and I'd leave her there and I'd go home because I wanted to finish working and she'd stay and have fun. That was stupid. I mean, just crazy stuff I did to chase this dollar that once I got it, I lost some of the things that I was doing it for in the first place.
It's, if you were to go, I'm speechless, because I believe that that's very true to a lot of people. How far down the road they get before they course correct, I think, is the biggest question. And when you look back, Brian, we're like, because I mean, you've accomplished some crazy, awesome things, from a business mechanical perspective, right? Like playing the game, but obviously there were some sacrifices. If you were to go back, whether it was the landscaping business or different area or like different ventures, could you go back and say, hey, if this decision was maybe looked at a little bit different, how you would have stayed within the white lines of what you're trying to accomplish now?
So this is a very tough question, and I'm going to give you a non-standard answer, because the standard answer is, oh yeah, if I could go back, I would change this and this, and I've been more successful and more. Well, guess what? That wasn't my journey. And just because I'd made a different decision doesn't mean it would have turned out the way it turned out for me. The decisions I made got me where I am. If I'd made different decisions, who knows where I'd be? My journey was my journey. I can't go back and change that. So I'm not going to sit here and regret it.
I love it, because that's how I answer the question too.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah. I like it. So, all right. I do really enjoy that. But when I think about, let's go back to like how you had to, like when you, here, I know, let me frame the question the right way. The motivation to prove to yourself that you were able to do all these things and be successful, not what everybody taught you. How do you keep something like that drive where you can eat glass? And like, I mean, you had said that you had scaled up this, one of the companies that turned into nothing because of how, like, we have to keep going in the face of that kind of craziness. And that drive was driving you. How do you do that if you don't have that crazy drive?
If you don't have that crazy drive, then you're not going to do it. Let's just start with that.
Okay. If you were to, agreed. And agreed. And then how do we sheath or like contain that dark part that's unhealthy?
If you ever read my first box, I call it my first box, my first book. It's called I Give the Dumb Kids Hope. Okay. And it's not about other kids. It was about me. And there's a story behind it. And it's funny, but in that book, I talk about my anger box, and I had to take all that anger that was in me and shove it into a box and close the lid. Right. But when I needed it, I could crack that lid open just a little bit to let some of that out to get shit done. Whether I needed to be driven forward or because I could use it to motivate me. I could use it to make other people do things. And then I have to close it back up because I never wanted to let that thing go all the way open because I'd turn into a raving lunatic. But that was what I had. I had that anger box, and it had a drive and a purpose and a goal. And that goal was to be rich. I hate to say it that way, but that was the goal. Well, when I got there and we sold that last company, and suddenly I've got, a 10,000 square foot house and a lake house and a beach house and an airplane and all the cars you can imagine and boats, and didn't have to work. All of a sudden I had everything you ever wanted in life. That drive in my mind actually went away. And I remember after selling the company, I used to tell people that I have no goals and I have no ambition anymore because I've worked so hard for so long to get here. there's nothing left. There's nothing left inside me, and I needed to take a break. And so I tried to quit, which I've done a couple of times. But if you're an entrepreneur, what you know about yourself, or what you will find out if you're in that situation, is your brain never stops. And so I couldn't. And so I started another business.
ADHD, that thing that the teachers didn't really like about it, right?
And so, and I'll give you, and this is a progression that goes through time, but I'll give you a little story. I was over, you know who Richard Branson is? Mm-hmm. Okay, so he owns an island called Necker Island over in the BVI, and I was over there in July, spent 5 days over there. Unbelievable trip.
No way, you were there. I love it.
Spent a lot of time with Richard, sat down with him on multiple occasions in that 5 days, and we had some great conversations. And I asked him this question, because it was his birthday. And I said, Richard, you're 73 years old and you own over 100 companies, and you work with young entrepreneurs and micro lending, and you work with big stuff like shipping. I said, why are you still doing this? You're worth billions of dollars. You live on an island where you have 20 people on staff that take care of your every whim. He would walk into the room and they'd walk over and hand him a drink and say, what else can we do for you? I mean, what? That's the life it's crazy, right? I said, what motivates you to keep doing this? And by the way, this is one of the reasons I do what I do with my coaching. And he said, let me tell you something, Brian. If you have a talent or an ability, and that can be owning or building or running or teaching people how to run businesses. If you have a talent or ability and you can use that to make the world a better place, then you have an obligation to do that, to give back to the world that gave you everything you've got. And that's why I still do it. That's like a freaking mic drop moment.
Yeah. Right.
Like, okay.
Well, it's tied into like my belief that, I mean, human beings have to wake up and move forward towards a goal or towards something. Otherwise we're like, that's what we're created to do, that. Like the dopamine structure and everything that we're doing is moving towards something. And that's why the podcast used to be called Life After Business, Brian, like years and years ago, because it was like people would sell their identity. And then like the worst question you can ask someone is, what do you do? And they would say, well, I used to. So there's this identity that's so tied into the original creation that they have. Mm-hmm. So going back to like, because of how many ventures you've had, and I agree with Richard 100% about moving forward, but like as you've evolved to understand that now, where, like, how did your identity evolve as you were doing these different ventures? Like, do you kind of reflect back and see how it kind of was tied to these different companies?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you another little story. So this is one of my other mentors. His name's Paul Pilzer. He lives out in Park City, Utah. And so I got there every year for a month and have and ski. And he's uber successful. And I'm afraid he sold that company years ago. I remember I was sitting at lunch with him and he said, Brian, what are you going to do next? He goes, you just sold your company. What are you going to do next? And I said, Paul, I have no idea. And he goes, well, what are you passionate about? And I said, I don't even know what that means. What is passion? Like I just work. That's what I do. So I don't know what you mean by passion. And he said, okay, here's your deal. You're going to have to find something that you are passionate about, and you're going to have to find a way to give back, or you will never be truly happy, because money ain't going to do it. And I was like, and it took me 5 years of thinking about that before I figured out I have a passion for writing and for teaching and giving back. To me, I got into politics. I'm on my local city council here. And so I get to help the people in my town, my neighbors and fellow business owners over here. So I have really strived to chase passions and give back. And that's what I've done.
That's awesome. And when I think about, like, to the point where you're now giving back, you've had to sit in a lot of these rooms where a lot of the smart people that went to maybe multiple degrees and have a letter alphabet soup at the back of their name for how many certifications. You know, I want to ask the imposter syndrome question, but I hate how like cliche that's gotten. But like I've struggled with it. So whatever it is, I mean, like there's a variety, or there's a degree of reality to it.
Everybody has it.
I'm curious I'm curious on your thoughts about that, like, experience and how you potentially encountered it over the years.
Yeah, everybody's got imposter syndrome. I don't care how successful you are. Ask anybody who's super successful. I listened to Dave Meltzer the other day, and he was talking about having imposter syndrome at his level. You know who Dave Meltzer is? Like,
I don't actually.
He's a personal coach to 3 Fortune 50 CEOs.
Okay.
Like, all the Fortune 500, Fortune 100 guys have personal coaches. Yeah. He's a coach to 3 of them. Like, this guy's the man, right? And, you know, he was talking about his imposter syndrome. We've all got it. But you gotta, So this gets back, this is a longer conversation, but one of the baseline ideas here is that human beings can think either emotionally or intellectually, but they can never think both of those at the same time. Okay.
Is that what's wrong with my brain?
You're either thinking emotionally or you're thinking intellectually, right? Yeah. And when you're thinking emotionally, a lot of times that's not smart. So when you start having thoughts like this imposter syndrome or negative self-worth or negative self-image, you've got to understand that that's emotion and it's in your head, and you got to stop thinking emotionally and move over to the intellectual side of the thought process and go, no, that's not true, right? And then, by the way, this is also where a good coach comes in. Everybody needs a good coach, by the way. Everybody. I've got two.
It's so fascinating.
So that's when you go to your coach or your mentor and you say, hey, man, I've been, and they'll go, no. Listen to me. Stop thinking like that.
Well, it's so helpful because I get slapped upside the face recently by one of my partners. And like what I've noticed is if I don't deal with that, the resentment starts to bubble, and that is just destructive. And like, but that's emotionally, like you said. And what I think is so fascinating is like when when we go into onboard a new client or we're doing one of those assessments that you and I were talking about, it's like, we're effectively asking the person to step on a scale. Like, how have you done so far? Right. And like, if you think about like your story of dropping out and succeeding and trying to prove to yourself, that's what I'd say a good chunk of the people are. It's not everybody at all, but like, I mean, it's a good percentage, Brian, where then we're having to have an objective, like, where are we at conversation, and people, it's rough for people
because they don't want to break down their Facebook happy persona. Oh, I'm super successful. I know you are, but your wife yelled at you this morning just like mine did. So
you put on your underwear and your pants with 2 feet. So how have I'm sorry I'm stuck on this because I think it's so helpful, because I think that this is we talk so often on this podcast and a lot of other places of all the intellectual, mechanical, and objective things to do, but like the real sticking points are the decision that are rooted in an emotion. And so like as you're going through with these companies and growing them, what was driving you? Like, what was the ultimate goal? Was it exits? Was it cash flow? Or was it like a dollar amount in your bank? Or like, what were you optimizing for as you were marching towards all these different ventures?
Entrepreneurs, and I find the same thing with salespeople. We're warriors. We're Vikings. We're soldiers. We want to be in the fight. We're the guy that says, put me in, coach. We're the guy that, grabs a gun and charges the fire. That's who we are. So the adrenaline of winning is what drives, I think, a lot of top entrepreneurs, not the money. I use this example. My favorite artist ever is Kenny Chesney. I mean, he's just like, to me, his music is friggin' amazing. The guy's got more money than he can ever spend. Why in the world does he still go out and kill himself every single day doing concert tours and all this stuff when he doesn't have to, right? It's because he's out there winning. That's why. It's the winning. It's the adrenaline rush of winning and stages and it's got nothing to do with the money, right? And that's, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are like that. They go because it's the adrenaline rush of winning or conquering that drives them more than the money.
I couldn't agree with you more, because like I think about one of the biggest issues. I think it's a couple fold, Brian, is like so when people sold and they ended up on my podcast, and I always joke around that people have this beautiful, huge Charles Schwab, pretty diversified pie chart, and no one needs them, and they have no purpose.
They got no fight.
Miserable. Right. But I think what you just tapped into that I think is a huge component of that. It's not just the purpose that they need, but it's the outlet for the competition. Because like I was sitting down with my kids are now in first grade. I got these twin daughters, Brian, and they're playing soccer, and I was a soccer player. And I live 98% of my mind in the future. And as I'm watching, all these floods of memories are coming back, Brian. And I'm like, I have this like animal like competitiveness that's like bubbling up inside of me, and the business is the outlet.
You're a warrior.
I mean, honestly, it's not. Very fascinating.
Yeah, we're warriors, man. We gotta fight.
How did you feel like, so with all of like the, like using that warrior terminology, like I'm just picturing you scaling 7 franchise in the landscaping business, or then you got the direct to consumer for insurance, and you're sitting there, you built these companies that were revolutionary or beyond success of what someone that was probably helping you thinking that you should have accomplished. So that, again, the people that went through all the school and they're sitting there and they're going, how is this guy doing this? How did you, like, what game did you think you were playing at that moment? Like, how did you reconcile with all these smart people were sitting on the advice side while you were sitting in the driver's seat?
Look, success in anything you do is a progression, right? Success is a progression, right? So the example I'll use is Apple. What does Apple do today, right? You have an Apple phone, iPhone?
Mm-hmm.
I got an iPhone.
Oh, yeah.
Did Apple start off making phones? Nope. They started off making motherboards. They went from motherboards to computers to educational software to iPods to phone. They progressed to where they are today, right? When I started my first insurance agency that turned into the first direct to consumer, we started off selling insurance door to door. And I said, this is dumb. Why am I going door to door selling insurance? But because half the time I get there and they wouldn't qualify. So I started qualifying people on the phone before I drive out there. And I thought, well, geez, I just saved 50% of my time because I don't have to drive out there to find out if they're qualified. Well, then even if they were qualified, I still had to drive out there. And then I was like, why am I driving out there when I can stay home and sell somebody else? So I hired a guy to drive out there. And then that was working. And then all of a sudden I'm like, well, if I could not pay that guy to drive out there, I'd make even more money. So why can't I do this over fax? And so I called an insurance carrier yes. and I said, hey, can I do fax? You know, this is how far back this goes, right? And they were like, that's not the way we do things. And I said, I know that, but will you let me? And so I was the first person to get a test case to do fax signatures in the insurance industry. Well, we built the second largest agency in the country in 6 months with 5 people competing against organizations with 500 or 600 because we were staying in the office selling and doing things over fax as opposed to the traditional way of having to drive all over the place. Well, then I said, well, if I can do this locally, why can't I just do this everywhere? So back then you could do a spoof number, right? So I would set up a phone number in Memphis, Tennessee, which was local, even though I'm sitting in Atlanta, and people would call the local Memphis number. It'd ring to Atlanta. And pretty soon I had 13 offices. I didn't, I had 5 people, but it looked like I had 13 offices all over the country. And now all of a sudden we're selling insurance all over the place. And the insurance carriers are like, how the hell are you doing this? Will you come teach the rest of our people how to do it? And by the way, this company wants to buy you. So it wasn't that I was a genius. I called myself ambitiously lazy, right? I'm willing to work really hard to figure out how to not work. And so I just figured out a better way to do it that was more efficient. Not because I was a genius. I was just damn lazy and didn't want to drive all over the town talking to people. And weirdly enough, that's what turned into the direct-to-consumer call center space in the health insurance industry today. I mean, that's it. That's how it started.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't anything amazing or miraculous. It was just, why am I driving this person's house? I don't want to drive to their house. I can talk to them on the phone, right?
Yeah. So let's pull. I want to pull it. Yeah. I love it. So I want to pull that thread. So like, I want to, like, your thought process in that moment allowed you to believe in yourself. Like, this is ridiculous how everybody else is doing it. I think we should do it this way. Where in your past or your experience, Brian, do you think that became part of your DNA? Where like the hey in the box thinking is not my deal. Like, where did you get that confidence, or how did that start to manifest in you?
I have no idea. I hate to tell you that answer, but I really have no idea. I have always said it's because I'm lazy, ambitiously lazy. I will figure out a way to do it better so that I don't have to do it the long way. That's why every company I've built, I always built so that I was not a part of the machine, right? Like I own 4 restaurants today. We do about $8 million in revenue. Most of my employees have never met me, don't know who I am. And if I sell the company, they'll never miss me. Mm-hmm. By the way, that adds intrinsic value in your company. It's part of what you teach, right?
Yeah, I love it. Nice. Yeah. That was well placed. Yeah. Pardon the brief interruption. I hope you're enjoying that conversation with Brian. If you like how reflective Brian is, how thoughtful he is, and how he's handled his adversity, I think one of the best things to do is level up your understanding of what do you want long-term? What is that clearly identified goal and that outcome? And then what's the purposeful action you need to be taking every day? And if you have that framework, you can handle adversity, I believe, a lot better because you have a framework for decision making to make sure that you can stay on track to designing the life and the equity value and the cash flow that you want. check out the Intentional Growth Starter Kit, which is the free access where we got samples from the academy. We've got the case study on someone projecting out the value of the business. Or you can jump right into the do-it-yourself Intentional Growth Academy. That's $9.95 with the $500 coupon in the show notes below. So you can level up, clarify what you want, understand how to build a valuable company. So that way you've got the knowledge and the foundation to handle adversity or something that you did not expect when it presents itself. So you can stay on track and make the entire journey of owning and running a company worth it. So again, thanks for tuning in, and I will leave you back to the interview with Brian. There's something about the hey, why are we doing it this way?
Yeah.
That is just not as ingrained in it. I think it goes back to the warrior want to win. I think there's a lot of attributes to that. Ambitiously lazy, I think, is a thing. And I want to go back to some of the mechanical parts about your journey. So you did the franchise from the lawn care. So maybe we can let's start maybe, Brian, just kind of curious in the different industries. And then I want to go to how you exited them and your expectations. But first, lawn mowing and landscaping, I think kind of makes sense for someone that was trying to figure out how to make an income.
With no education and no discernible skills, I could mow grass and dig holes, right?
That makes some sense. How in the hell did you get into insurance?
So the story, and by the way, the reason I got into franchising was because I wanted to sell the landscaping business because I hated it. And so I called a business broker and he said, well, you have a pretty good business here. You don't even hardly work in it. Why are you selling it? I'm like, well, because I'm tired of doing it. I don't want to do it anymore. And he said, what are you going to do next? And I said, I have no idea. He goes, well, why don't you franchise it? You've got a pretty good model here. And I was like, okay. And that's how we got into franchising. So
you went from selling it to having 7.
Yeah.
Wait a second. That was the wrong direction. So okay.
So now to finish that story, but that's also the business that fell apart because I had the wrong partner, had the wrong lawyer. We had the wrong, we call them UFOX back then, Universal Franchise Operating something. I don't know what it was.
Okay.
And so I ended up losing that company. I lost everything because I made a couple of huge mistakes in business. 90% of my revenue was coming from a single general contractor. And when they fired me to hire the son of the new vice president, we lost all of our business. And then my franchisees found a loophole in my contract that allowed them to not have to pay me. And my only option was to sue everybody. And instead of suing, I just sold out. So I just walked away from that one. Well, now I had lost everything. So I didn't have any money. And so I didn't make my health insurance payments for a couple of months. And they were like $130 a month. And my daughter was 2 at the time. And we found out that she had atrial septal defect, which is a hole in her heart. She had to have open heart surgery. So here I am. I didn't pay my insurance premiums. Now I have no health insurance. And my daughter needs open heart surgery. Well, shit, now what am I going to do?
Sell something.
So my buddy who was selling insurance, he comes over to the house and I said, can you sell me an insurance policy? And he goes, well, I can. And I'll sell you this and it'll take a 2-year wait period, blah, blah, blah. He goes, but why don't you start selling insurance with me? I'm like, dude, I am not going to sell insurance. That's like the worst thing in the world. It's reminds me of Groundhog Day and Bill Murray punches.
You're sitting there and you need money and yet you still have the ability to say, no, I don't want to do that. Even though I need cash is real.
And so he's like, well, look how much money I'm making. He shows me a check and I'm like, ain't doing it. This goes on for like 6 months. Every month he's like, look how big my check is. And finally I was like, dude, that's a big check.
What were you doing?
When I lost everything,
with your daughter?
I called it. I went back to me, a shovel and a truck. So I went from 7 offices to me and a little pickup truck and a shovel. And I was back to digging holes by myself out trying to make money. I had lost it. I had to sell my houses, my cars. I sold everything. I went dead broke. So I'm back to me, a shovel and a truck. So I'm out digging holes every day and he's showing up, showing me these big checks. So finally I was like, all right, how do I sell insurance? And so he said, give me $500. And so I gave him $500. He said, you're going to go on one appointment and then you're going to go sell insurance on your own. So I went on one appointment. We go in, we walk out. He's like, I just made $500. And I was like, wow, that was easy. He said, all right, here's 20 leads. Go sell. This was on a Monday. On Thursday, I walked into the office where everybody worked and I had sold 12 policies. And the guy that owns the agency, he goes, you have 12 policies? And I said, yeah. He goes, how many leads did you get? I'm like, 20. Is that good? He's like, is that good?
You're not even any idea.
He goes, that's like top 1% in the country. How the hell did you do that? I'm like, I don't know. Who knew I could sell? Right. So within 6 weeks, I was like 50% of the production in this insurance agency. I had no idea. It's like a skill set that's buried that nobody knew I had. And so then I was like, well, holy cow, I can sell insurance. And now I'm making way more money at night selling insurance than I was at day digging holes. So I quit the digging holes, went to full-time insurance. And then because it's me, I said, you know what? I don't want to work for this guy. I'm going to start my own agency. So this is another long story, but I ended up having to get my wife licensed, and I was under a captive contract and yada, yada, yada. 6 weeks later, we had our own insurance agency, and a year and a half later, I sold it to a .com and moved down to the Georgia State campus. So because it was a dawn of the internet, and we had just developed this thing I just told you about a few minutes ago. So it wasn't that I knew anything about insurance. Quite frankly, after I gave him that $500 and he sent me out to sell those 12 policies, I think the statute of limitations is over now because that was 25 years ago. I wasn't even a licensed insurance agent. They just sent me out just like, here, go sell something. I
back in the day, policies, man, it was,
didn't even have a license. And then they were like, oh shit, you got to get a license. I'm like, really? How do you do that? You know?
Yeah. That's like the show Suits. I love the conversation. Going back to like, dude, losing that much after the landscaping business, like, how did you process that?
It was devastating. I mean, the first thing you sell is, I had a rental house, then you sell the Mercedes, then the sports car, then the motorcycle, then you start selling your furniture. Literally. I mean, this is in my book. I sold all my furniture because I didn't have any money. I mean, that month when they fired me, they didn't pay me. And I bounced 110 checks at the bank that month because I wrote checks in advance for all of our stuff. And they didn't pay me, so I couldn't cover any of the checks. So all 110 checks bounced, $3,000 bounced check charges. The bank sends me a letter, says you're no longer welcome here. And you're screwed, right? But the thing is, here's the thing, Ryan, what are you going to do? You have a wife and a baby. You have no choice. So you start selling everything you've got. My mother came to visit for Christmas and she's like, where's the furniture? I said, I sold it. She goes, oh my God, for Christmas, we're going to buy you furniture. So they went and bought furniture. They left after Christmas. Guess what I did? I sold the furniture because I needed money. I didn't need a couch. I needed money.
Right.
Oh, man, so yeah, you have to start over and you just have to go. You have no choice.
I hear you. I have some family friends that chose, the wrong choice, honestly, Brian. And it's, that's why I asked, because when you go from what the world thinks of you, it's the same. It's a lot of these kind of concepts I see are also intertwined because, when you sell a business, your identity a lot of times goes with it. But then people are like, well, who are you without that? And a lot of times people are like, who are you without your car and your shit? It's all personal shit. So then there's all of that stuff that floods in. That's, I think, potentially worse than having no money. Because it's like the money, it's like, I can go sell some more stuff and accumulate some more money. But like, then all of a sudden there's that mental garbage. So you start, so going to, because I understand operationally how you scaled then the insurance part. You sell to was it an actual venture capital or was it private? Because you said
no, the first one was venture capital, second was venture capital, third was private equity.
So what's your experience with venture capital? Because that's usually high growth and you're diluted a lot. So like, what was that ride like? And then how did you end up choosing them and how did that unfold?
The first one, they came to me because we had developed this direct to consumer thing and they were trying to sell insurance online, which had never been done. Right. So we were an easy fit into their portfolio company. I did not make a lot of money on that one. I think they paid me $1 million for that. And I've got to realize,
like 2 years ago, you had no couch.
Well, that's right? True. 2 years ago, I had no couch. Now I have $1 million. You're right. But speaking in today's terms, $1 million ain't that much money. It's kind of a funny thing to say.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But, and then when I went through the second acquisition, which was another venture capital, I was flying out to Sand Hill Road out in Silicon Valley every month and had to go to these board meetings. I learned a lot about venture capital. Venture capital is a game, and it is not a game of making profit. It is a game of flipping companies and dumping them off on the next highest bidder. I'm probably going to make some enemies saying that. But I can remember standing in a conference room in a very, very well-known VC, and looking at all the plaques on the wall. Bought it for this, exit this, bought it for this, exit this, bought, exit. If there were 20 plaques, 12 of those companies were out of business. They bought them, ran up the value, dumped them, took their money. Those companies are gone. I remember when they bought me, the company, they acquired me and they had rolled me into another company. We were losing about $500,000 a month. And I was running Atlanta, and the tech company was based out of San Jose. And I remember going, what are you guys doing? You're burning $500,000 a month. This is stupid. I can do this profitably. In fact, you should stop burning $500,000 a month and let me build it profitably. I'll become the CEO. I'll run this thing profitably, and we'll build this at a profit, and we'll have a long-term profitable company. And I went back to the next board meeting, and they pulled me aside and they said, Brian, we don't want a profitable company. That's not what we're doing here. We're either going to make $1 billion or it's going to fail. That's our goal. Because we know if we do 10 investments, one will make $1 billion, one will make a couple $100 million, one will break even, and 7 will fail, and that's okay. So this is either going to be $1 billion exit or it's going to fail. So we're just going to keep throwing money at it. Thank you for your service. We no longer need you because you're not on board. That's venture capital.
And what I want for people, Brian, is I think that just to put a container on my thoughts, I think there is a VC. It needs to play a part in our economy. It needs to help with innovative technologies. It is ballooned along with private equity in a dysfunctional percentage of everything. I saw a stat in Wall Street Journal last week, Brian, that Delta has 79% of their $12 billion pension in PE and VC and REITs. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, it's so dysfunctional. It should be like, what, 5 to 10? So I think the biggest thing that I want for everybody is to understand, like, if you're hitching your wagon with one of these, just understand the game. Like you had said, like, what game are we playing? Are we playing the cash flow game? Are we playing the buyout game? Are we playing the burn it, whatever the game is. So 2 VC sales. So then how was your mind getting wrapped around, like, what kind of experience that you wanted? If you were not liking the game, how did you start thinking about the game?
I didn't dislike the game. I just started to understand the game. It's those moments. I'm the kid that had to bootstrap. I was a kid that had to build a company and be profitable and pay my bills. So it was like mind blowing to me when my first company got acquired. And I remember we were having this discussion with the chief marketing officer of this company that acquired me. And she was doing some really stupid stuff and spending money that made no sense whatsoever. And I challenged her in a executive meeting. I said, that doesn't make any sense. You're paying double what I can get this for on the street. I can do this. And I said, you're just losing money for no reason. And I remember her telling me, we are supposed to lose money. Our investors expect it. And you're a kid that spent the last 10 years struggling, and you're just like, I don't even know what that means. Like that doesn't compute with me. I don't get it. And that was the first. And the second one, when they said, we don't care about profit. After that, I was like, all right, well, then who cares? Let's just, that's the VC game. That's a VC. I don't get to play that game because I don't have billions of dollars.
Well, I think with that I agreed. And that unfortunate mindset has been just spreading throughout the last 10 years into the economy. We're like, hey, you're a commercial cleaner, you're a home remodeler, whatever normal business you are. It doesn't, well, no, actually it does.
Yeah, it does.
You have to pay your taxes, you have to pay your payroll. Like, so if once you kind of got acclimated to that game, then you got into, what was the
third one was a PE. They care about money. They care about profit. Because that's what they buy, high growth, high profit companies, and that's what we were. So that was a different type of acquisition.
Was that still the insurance space? So
no, that was the online. We were a pay-per-performance online lead gen company.
Okay, that's right.
Right. Yep. So we were a middleman between online lead gen.
Let's talk about how you went from the insurance space to that and why.
Yeah. So I had still owned the online insurance agency. And of course, everything in the world is driven by sales, and sales are driven by leads. Right. So we decided to start a lead company so we could generate our own leads. That's literally all it was. Let's just start an online lead gen company to generate our own leads. In 2.5 years, that thing just blew up. We went from 0 revenue to 60 million revenue on an $80 million exit in less than 3 years. It was a side business, and it turned into the big dog. Just because was
that your biggest exit for money?
Yeah. And that was back in, we called that the Wild West days, right? There was no canned spam, if you know what that is. We were dropping 200 million emails a day. and then selling our
Oh
data
my
out the
gosh.
back end to other people who were dropping another $200 million, a million emails a day. And we were making 800 to 100,000 to $1 million a month just selling our data for other people
Oh my
to
gosh.
drop mail on. You can't do that today. But back then,
Did you own that? Who'd you own that with? Was it just yourself, or
no, there were
what
5 partners in that company.
Was that were there people that were tied into the insurance arm of the
Yeah,
business
so
too?
that's a long story, but me and my one partner owned the insurance agency. My other partner brought in 2 partners of his own to start the internet marketing company. So we all had split different percentage ownerships of everything that we did. But yeah, that was crazy. He had experience doing that. I didn't, so he did it, and it turned into the big thing. And then that turned into, as soon as we sold that, we sold the other one, and then everybody was like, "Oh my God, you need to consult with us."
I want to get to that part. So, what have you learned about partnerships over the years?
I've had the most success in partnerships. I know this is going to go against the grain. I've had the most success in partnerships, and I'll tell you why. And I wrote about this in my book, right? My book right here. Here's my shameless plug, The Dropout multi-millionaire.
Oh, no shameless plug here. And we'll have the links in the show notes.
And this, by the way, everything I've ever written in my books was a combination of the 300 books that are down on my bookshelf right there. So I call that my brain down there. So if you recognize what I'm going to tell you, it's because I probably stole part of it. So there are 4 personalities to build a successful company. You've got to have all 4. You have to have an entrepreneur that has the vision. You have to have a manager, which is technically the CEO. You have to have a salesperson who can go out and sell stuff. And you have to have the technician who can actually do the work. If you think about your company, you had 115 employees, right? That's what I read about you. In there, you had a lot of technicians. You also had management that were handling all the management crap. You had salespeople that were out selling stuff. And then you had whoever the entrepreneur and the CEO was. So you need these personalities within a company if you're going to grow it.
Well, I'll just be to rally on that. I was missing that combination. So I'm on my it's technically my third iteration of what I've been trying to do since I started the podcast, Brian. And now I have those combination of people. And I learned, so I've got the opposite partnership thing where I've gone through some dynamics trying to by accident architect what you just described.
And by the way, you can hire out some of these personalities, but they generally cost you a lot of money if they're going to be good enough to do what you need to do. Right. So you can either bring them in as partners or you can hire them. But if you're going to hire somebody that's going to be able to do what you need to do, that's going to be an expensive individual because they're very good at what they do.
For the listeners, like that's an equity versus cash flow issue. Cause cause you could go in and say, okay, well, I need these partners, equity, then you're covering your payroll, or you can keep all the equity yourself, but then you have to go raise your money, raise some money and some capital to say, okay, I need to pay them to do the work. And it's not an easy choice.
And the challenge is, most is a tough word, but I'm going to use it. Most people that start businesses think they're a CEO and they're not. Okay. Most people that start businesses are either a salesperson or a manager. And a lot of times it's a technician. Like, I've been doing this for XYZ company. I'm the technician. I'm going to go do it for myself. And now I'm the CEO entrepreneur. No, you're not. You're still the technician. You need to hire out somebody. I always use the example of Joe's Plumbing. Right. I like to do things in simplistic way. When we were in the military, we taught 5th grade. Joe works for XYZ company, 10 years. They bill him out at $150 an hour. He's making $50 an hour. Joe wakes up one day and goes, why the hell am I making $50 an hour when they're billing me out at $150 an hour? I'm going to start my own business. I now own Joe's Plumbing. Joe's a damn good plumber. If Joe's Plumbing fails, it's not because Joe doesn't know how to plumb. It's because Joe doesn't know how to run a business. That's why Joe fails.
Accounts receivable.
Joe thought he was an entrepreneur and CEO when he was actually the technician. So he is missing an entire set of business skill sets that are going to break his company. So this is the challenge with most young entrepreneurs, not young in age, but young in business, is they think there's something they're not. And that's ego driven. And it usually is their downfall, which is, again, why you need a coach, somebody to come in and go, listen to me. You got to get dead honest with yourself. You're either the salesperson, the manager, the entrepreneur, or the technician. Now, you can be an entrepreneur and a salesperson because if you can sell a vision, you can sell a product. Entrepreneurs and salespeople generally make terrible managers because entrepreneurs think in bullet points and salespeople live on the bleeding edge, and managers have to be bam, 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 right? Got to be on the money. Everything's got to be perfect. Those taxes got to get paid. Those employees got to get paid. That insurance has to get paid. You have to have the right posters hanging on the wall. That's a manager's job. I'm an entrepreneur. I think in bullet points, 1,000 miles an hour, 30,000 feet. You ask me to do details, we're going to fail. So I recognize my failure.
Yeah. And I want to pull on one of the things that you said earlier, because a lot of times when us entrepreneurs will start a business and then it's growing, we started because of the lifestyle and the freedom, but then we get sucked in and we're owned by this, golden goose that has trapped us, golden cage. And I think, from my personal experience, Brian, is vision, idea, freedom, everything that you just said. And then you take it. And then what happens is the day-to-day operations suck you in, because it's like, if you don't bill that client, then you don't have anything. And then if you don't collect that receivable, so like what happens is, unless you do what you just said, which is hire the people or get partners, there's no way to break free of those operations to keep the ship moving forward. And then you end up stuck in this $2 million hamster wheel where and then to take it even a layer further, Brian, is like, what happens is then I see this, I call it a $2 million plateau, because the person's like, I don't know, I'm curious if you've ever seen this, where someone goes, hey, like the consultant just goes, hey, why don't you just go hire someone? And what's going on in their head is like, because I'm finally making 150 grand to pay my bills.
Boom, there it is.
And right? It's like, why don't you go hire someone with the extra money? And so like, it's what no one's talking about. It's not the product pricing fit. It's not this or that. It's like the person's finally paying themselves and they can't afford to hire someone without some projections.
Biggest problem with entrepreneurs. They start living on that EBITDA. They start living on that revenue, and they can't afford to hire the people that if they would take a pay cut and they would hire those people, they could accelerate that business twofold and make double that amount of money. But they can't see it because they got their 30-degree blinders on. That's what I call it, by the way. Entrepreneurs have 30-degree blinders. A coach comes in with 180-degree vision and says, you don't understand. That's why they plateau. If you would get yourself out of that, take a pay cut, hire somebody to do it, you'd go from 2 million to 5 million, just like that. Your income would go to 150 to 400. But you got to be able to step back to make that happen.
100%, Brian. And I think about for the listeners to help sift through, as Brian and I are talking about the coaching, is like where we come in, because we have this financial dashboard offering, Brian, that it's a financial dashboard offering that comes with a couple calls per month if someone doesn't want our CFO services. So it's different than traditional coaching. But what I think is fascinating, and what I've noticed that the experience people have, is that, so for me, I've gone through partnership buyouts. It's like, okay, we'll figure out how to go through that financial cash flow with the right way. And what's always given me confidence is I know what the hell's on the other side of that. I'm not going to do this if I can't actually make my salary or my distributions again. And then if it doesn't grow value, I'm not going to do it. Right. So it's this decision-making framework where I think the people that get to that 150, it's like, great. But then it's like, well, the next idea, it's like, how much is it going to cost? And when do I get my money back? Because you can't make that decision in the dark. But then people get, like you said, their lifestyle creeps in. And then it's just like this, it just sticks. Did you ever deal with that when you were in any of these businesses?
Again, back to my first business that failed. 2 big lessons I learned, right? The first lesson I learned was never get too wrapped up in one client, right? We had 90% of our client was or 90% of our business wrapped up in one client. Number 2, and by the way, we just saw this happen in 2020 again. Number 2 was I had no financial assets to back me up when my business took a hit. Okay. So what happened in 2020 when COVID hit? All the weak players got washed out, and everybody who had built substantial assets to back themselves up are still in the game. And the problem we have with these entrepreneurs,
as Mr. Warren Buffett always talks about, right?
These entrepreneurs, they live on every dime they've got, which is what I did, and they keep increasing their lifestyle as their income goes up instead of replacing themselves in the business. And then when they hit that first bump, I was 26 years old. I was making $200,000 a year. I was living high on the hog. I thought I had Mercedes and a rental property. I was in the BVI diving when I got that phone call, and my business went from, here to zero. And I got home and didn't have any cash, couldn't pay my bills, bounced a bunch of checks, made a huge mistake.
Oh man, I get it. I totally get it. So as you think about your exits, and one of the Because one of the things about like the concept of intentional growth is building an asset is through sustainable future cash flows.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I got like, well, I not think I know, like I got the ton of bricks hit in my face when I realized that the sustainable cash flow is the name of is the true game, not the VC game, but private equity or
Mm-hmm.
small business game, that sustainable cash flow. So after that first exit, or even a couple of these, how did you start thinking about how to build a business after you'd gone through an exit? How did your business acumen or mindset or whatever change?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We sold that big company in 2006, 2007. You know what happened in 2008, right? Market crash. 2 of the partners put all of our money into tax-free municipal bonds. 3 of the partners went into real estate and stock.
Real estate. Oh.
2 of the partners went bankrupt after making a lot of money. And then me and Steve, the other senior partner, sat back for several years just collecting 5% interest on our money, living like kings, right? So important lesson there.
Yeah,
And
right.
one of my investment guiding principles today is that I will invest 100% of my income. I will risk 100% of my income, but I will not risk my assets.
Ooh, I like that.
So
I like that a lot.
Like if I make $1 million this year, I will throw $1 million into investments, but I won't take money out of my portfolio. So I'm not willing to risk my assets. Now I have a substantial assets and substantial income, so that makes it really easy for me to say. If you don't have those things, it makes it a little tougher. But that's my.
Oh, come on! You sold your furniture, man. You've already given us plenty of scars to be able to say that with some humbleness, humility, I should say. But I like that decision making framework, because that's very similar to what we teach in the academy. Because at the end of the day, going back to even that, Brian, at that, if someone's making 150 and they need to get to that next level, go from a couple million to that 5 million or whatever it is, they're betting their income, they're betting their income to grow the asset value. That's pure and simple of exactly what they're doing. They're not. So I really like that framework, because the goal is to create an iron fortress around your assets that kick out cash.
You don't want to lose everything you've got. I've done that. It is not fun. It is not something I'm ever going to go through again. When I got
Have you read the Psychology of Money book?
No, I've got it downstairs though. I see your brain behind you there. That's your big bookshelf back there.
Well, you see probably half of it, because I had this terrible habit of buying every Audible book that I listened to. And then I was like, why the hell am I doing this? I'm just double paying for all my books.
Right.
So, the Psychology of Money book is fascinating, Brian, because it's truly a book about the psychology of money, not just money. And it talks about this guy that shorted everything in the Great Depression, made like $3.5 billion in the Great Depression. And the guy lost it all and killed himself, compared to like the people. Right. So it just shows you that it's rooted in humans and their intention. And the money is just the means of how they're accomplishing what they originally set out to do.
It's funny. You look at, and unfortunately people look at like Elon Musk, right? Sold PayPal for 160 million, dumped every single dollar into the next 3 companies. And
it worked out, Cuban, right?
It worked out really well. But that only works out for, 1 out of 1,000 people. So chances are that's probably a bad idea.
Well, and we both know that, like, he's juggling all this stuff with Twitter or X or whatever, because he's paper wealthy. He's got probably cash flow issues.
He had to sell stock to pay his $11 billion tax bill.
Right. Oh, so I honestly can't thank you enough for how genuine of a conversation this is, because like this is the real stuff, Brian. And I'm trying to bring more of this, like, because the decisions to grow a business are just, we can sit down and talk for weeks about all the mechanics behind it, but like, we're people that are doing all these things. And so, Brian, what you're doing right now with your 4 restaurants and the coaching, the podcast, the books, like, it sounds like you're kind of finding your flow zone of what brings you joy, and while making an impact and while making some money. And so we got these 3 things that intentional growth is: create wealth, enjoy work, make an impact, kind of live in the intersection of those, kind of similar to Dan Sullivan's 4 freedoms. But I'm with that in mind. How are you making decisions now to protect the lifestyle that you've built? Because I think that's important to make sure we don't say yes to things if they don't adhere to what you're trying to do. So do you have, like, how do you go through that?
Well, part of it is what I just said. I don't risk assets when I do investments. That's a big one. And I have enough income that I can make a lot of investments. I'm building a new restaurant right now. That's 1.3 million. I'm building another condo down in Florida on downtown Tampa. That's another 1.6. So these are investments that I can make that I would say the overriding thing in the back of my brain is, can I get hurt? And how badly? Well, if I'm only losing my income, I can't really get hurt. It's going to suck if I lose money, but it's not going to hurt me long term. And when I lose money and people say, oh my God, you lost money doing that. Like, yeah, I know, but it really isn't going to affect my lifestyle. So my lifestyle is, I'm not a billionaire. I'm not 100 millionaire. I'm none of those things, but I can do anything I want, go anywhere I want. I mean, and I don't have to worry about what it costs as long as I can maintain that lifestyle. And I'm not risking my assets and my decision-making on investments, then I'm in a good place.
Love it. Where did you shift from this opportunity is amazing, I'm going to sell insurance and I'm going to scale this company, grow, to what am I going to lose and how can I get hurt? When and how did that shift happen?
Yeah. So remember when that first company collapsed and I lost everything and I've got my wife and my baby and I can't afford to feed them and I'm selling my furniture, that burned into my soul. Don't ever take a chance on losing what you have again, ever. Right. Yep. And I remember back in my landscaping days, I was mowing the grass and doing landscaping for one of the Atlanta Braves. His name's Terry Pendleton. He was a third baseman for the Braves. And I remember when I met Terry, super great guy. And Terry told me, asked Terry one day, I said, hey, Terry, what's up with all these athletes that lose all their money? And he said, Brian, here's the challenge. These guys come from nothing. They start making millions. They suddenly think they're financial geniuses just because they're good at sports. And then they think they're going to turn their millions into billions. And they lose it 9 times out of 10. Just because you're good at something and just because you can make a lot of money at it does not make you a financial genius. So he said, I don't risk my money. He said, my money is sitting in T-bills. My house is paid for. My cars are paid for because I make my money playing baseball. That's where I make my money. I'm not worried about making 6% on my investments.
No, keep it.
I'm worried about making money playing baseball. And when I retire, I know where my money's at. It's sitting there and it's mine and it's never going to go anywhere. And so when I'll never forget that line. He called it the McDonald's safety net. So I've coined that phrase. So if everything goes to shit in my business, I know I can work at McDonald's and maintain my lifestyle.
Ooh, I love that. That is awesome.
That's what we call the McDonald's safety net, right?
That is the
I'll be driving my Ferrari down to McDonald's, but I can,
I
will keep that Ferrari.
I love it.
So when I got to the point where we had money, I rolled into my Terry Pendleton McDonald's safety net. I'm never going to risk my lifestyle. And as long as I don't push my lifestyle up to something stupid, I got a small plane, not a jet. I got a small boat, not a big one. I got a small condo at the beach, not a giant one.
You would love the Psychology of Money book, Brian. There was chapter 6, I think it's one page, and it was talking about it's about material shit. And this guy goes, we all want, everybody wants that flashy car so everybody can look at him, right? And this guy was like a New York Times reporter, or author for like decades. So he's like studies people and behavior and all this stuff. Well, back in the day, he was a valet when he was like in high school or something. He's like, here's the deal. You know what? I had grabbed those keys, and what I realized when someone has and this is a long time ago, so when someone's got $100,000 Corvette or something, now it's probably like 400. But and he goes, the one thing is, what I realized is the people don't have any clue who's driving that car. They only see the car. So the actual opposite of what you want is what you want everybody to look at you, but they look at the car. And what the second thing is, you can guarantee they have either $100,000 less in cash or $100,000 more in debt. And then the chapter was over. And his whole point was that after your needs, it's all ego driven. And I was like, oh, that's so fascinating. And by the way, I don't poo-poo anything that, like, if you want and can afford something, like, go for it.
I like what Ed Milet says. No, it's Brad Lee. He said, you're driving that car. And look, I'm guilty. I admit it. I have a Ferrari.
If you can afford it, like go for it. Like, good for you.
It's not that he asked this guy on his podcast, says, why do you have that car? He goes, because I like it. He goes, no, you like the way you think other people feel about you when you're driving that car. That is an ego car. That's all it is. And if you can afford it, great. But don't tell me it's awesome. And the example I use is I also have a Tesla Plaid, right? So my garage is Tesla Plaid, and I got a Ferrari.
I want to ride one of those. So I want to ride one of those.
If I take both of those cars and I drive them down to a parking lot and park them, that Tesla is faster than the Ferrari. It has better electronics than the Ferrari. It's more comfortable. It has a better sound system. It has self-drive. There is everything in the world is better about that Tesla. Nobody cares about the Tesla. They want to go look at the Ferrari because it's an ego car.
Yeah.
So,
I love it, man. Yeah, but call it what it is. It's okay, right?
It's what
totally
it is.
Okay. Yeah, and it's okay to want that stuff. That's I just got done on a Dan Sullivan kick, and he was just like, I mean, it's okay to want a bunch of stuff. Like, you don't have to apologize for wanting it as long as it makes sense with the overall math equation of how you're running your life.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything I haven't asked that I should?
That you should? I don't know. It depends on what your audience wants to hear. That's that.
fair rebuttal.
I don't know. Depends on what your audience wants to hear.
No, I really enjoyed this, Brian. I really enjoy the authentic explanation of your journey. Two final questions then, man. One is, where can everybody get in touch with you?
BrianWillMedia.com. BrianWillMedia.com. My books, my podcasts, my coaching programs, blogs, everything's on there.
Cool. And then the last question is, I'd love to know what people's definition of intentional is, because the name of the show, and I've learned a lot from people's answers. What's the word intentional mean to you?
Wow, put me on the spot there. Let's see, Ryan. Intentional. I guess intentional would be that I am doing it for a specific purpose. And then identifying that purpose is really what the goal would be. Because if you're doing it blindly, then it's not intentional, is it?
It's just luck.
It's just luck.
I love it. Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show. I had an absolute blast.
Ryan, this was one of my favorite podcasts. Thank you, sir.
As you probably could tell, I really had a lot of fun having that conversation with Brian. I think there's so many entrepreneurs where we struggle with some sort of, dropout factor, whatever your factor is that's driving you to own and run a company, be an entrepreneur.